Hi everyone, my name is Natalia Sikora-Zimna and I am a product owner at Nobl9. Today I have the pleasure to talk about Sumo Logic and Nobl9 and how these two applications can improve and simplify the process of monitoring the reliability of your products and services. But before we dig into technical details of how to create service level objectives on top of your product data, let's take a quick look at Sumo Logic and Nobl9 and the value they can add to your business. Sumo Logic provides a highly secure, scalable, and SaaS-based unified observability platform. By leveraging data in the form of logs, metrics, and traces, you are able to easily monitor and quickly troubleshoot, diagnose, and optimize application performance to give users the best experience they expect. The application is at the center of your business. Your custom application code brings everything together. This is the revenue generating part of your business. And this is what your customers care about. Your custom application code can benefit from monitoring, diagnostic, and troubleshooting capabilities of Sumo Logic with unified logs, metrics, and traces. Sumo Logic offers faster diagnosis with end-to-end distributed transaction tracing. With Sumo Logic, you will basically get deep analytics into how your application behaves. You'll be able to find long-running or faulty transactions. You will be able to drill down to specific trace to better understand timing relations or the overall journey through the application infrastructure, full metadata info, error details, and much, much more. So let's stop at this slide to see the breadth of Sumo Logic and the data it can pull in. So whether the data is on-prem or in the cloud, or whether the trace data is coming from open telemetry or Kubernetes and Docker, there can be a way to pull that into Sumo Logic. Why SLOs? Well, SLOs are a powerful tool that will basically help you make better business decisions. With Nobl9, you can easily set your SLOs that would, for example, help you test your product hypothesis, monitor these aspects of your applications that matter to your business, and better allocate your resources. Nobl9's goal is to find a balance between reliable delivery of new features, operational efficiency, and cost control. And all of that with customers' happiness in mind. Nobl9 supports Sumo Logic alongside with 20 other data sources to retrieve your metrics data, calculate and track your error budgets, and present them in a single view to see the overall health of your organization. But Nobl9 is so much more than just SLOs. It's an entire ecosystem of alerts, reports, and dashboards to help you monitor the reliability of your applications as simply and effortlessly as possible. And the beauty of Sumo Logic and Nobl9 partnership is that both share the same values, simplifying the process of gathering data and using it to monitor your application. Sumo Logic's platform empowers operations team to collect data, monitor, and manage the reliability of your applications. And Nobl9 simplifies the process of setting and monitoring SLOs and helps link them to your business KPIs. So you have your application data in Sumo Logic. With Nobl9, you can use this data to calculate SLOs based on your SLIs, make data-driven decisions, deliver an exceptional digital experience, and if necessary, be able to act ahead of time. So let's move on to the most interesting part, demo. So in this part, we'll cover the following points. How Nobl9's integration with Sumo allows teams to set clear reliability goals. How SLI computed from logs and metrics using Sumo Logic queries language are automatically ingested into Nobl9, and how SLOs can drive automated actions when error budgets are at risk. Okay, so let's move on to the presentation. In Sumo Logic, we can find the following types of metrics that can be used in Nobl9: logs and metrics. Log data are the details about the event, such as a resource that was accessed, who accessed it, and the time. In other words, logs will tell you what happened in the system that, for example, led to an issue you're trying to troubleshoot. Metrics are a measurement at a point of time for the system. There are a set of data points that measure a value of something. So, for example, you can think of a weather service that collects measurements of temperature over time. So let's imagine we have the following use case. I want to have an SLO that will help me monitor the health of my application and return the information about how many objects in my Kubernetes cluster were created or modified correctly. To do so, I'm using the following query to get the information about good events. So here's a sample query to retrieve logs from Sumo Logic. And note that the only requirement from Nobl9 is to ensure that the value and time are returned as Nobl9 time and 9 value, because this is what Nobl9 will explicitly look for. And as you can see, Sumo Logic returned a table that provided all the information that will be necessary to create an SLO. So for metrics, we'll be searching for something slightly different. So I want to use CPU load average metric for the past 15 minutes. And this is what I will be using in Nobl9. So I already received a time series that will be used while creating SLOs. And basically that's it. And the beauty of Nobl9 is that you can use any query that works in Sumo Logic as long as it contains N9 time and N9 value. All right, so let's move on to Nobl9, and we'll start our user journey from creating our data source. So I'm opening my data source wizard. I'm going to Sumo Logic integration, and here I can choose from 2 connection methods. So if you don't want to expose your server to Nobl9 or share your credentials, or if your company's firewall blocks outbound connections, you can use agent method. But if you want Nobl9 to access your server directly over the internet, use the direct connection method. This method requires users to enter their authentication credentials, which will be encrypted and safely stored on the Nobl9 server. So for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to use the direct connection. And here I am supposed to provide a couple of things. So I'm starting from service endpoint URL. I'm adding an access ID, an access key, and I'm choosing a project because all of the resources within Nobl9 have to exist in a project. I'm going with Sumo Logic Deminar, the project I created before this presentation. And I'm supposed to provide a name for my data source. So I'm going with Sumo Logic Deminar to find my data source easily. I could also add an optional description, but I'm going to skip it for this part. I'm clicking on Add Data Source, and as you can see, my data source has been configured correctly. Now that I have my data source created, I can move on to creating my SLOs. As you can see, my Deminar project has 1 service and no SLO. So let's fix this situation and start adding our first SLO. To do so, I'm going into my SLO wizard. I'm selecting a service. Again, I created that before my presentation. And this is to organize your resources and to be able to manage them easily later on. I'm choosing my data source, so the one that I created just seconds ago. And here, as you can see, I can choose from two types of metrics. Nobl9 allows you to query for a single time series that will be evaluated against a threshold. And this is my threshold metric. Or you can query for two time series to compare, for example, the count of good requests versus total requests. And in addition, for Sumo Logic integration, we have those two types of metrics we discussed before, metrics and logs. I'll start with logs. And let's come back to the first SLO example. So if you remember, I wanted to monitor if all of the resources in my Kubernetes cluster were applied correctly. So I'm choosing a ratio metric and logs. Ratio because I'm going to compare good events. So all the events where the resources were applied correctly to the number of total requests that happened in a given time series. And this is basically my basically how I query for data. Those queries are exactly the same as the one I used in Sumo Logic. So as long as they return N9 time and value, we're good to go. We can use whatever we used in Sumo Logic and don't worry about additional steps. The next step is choosing a time window because an SLO has to exist in a time window. If your business requires that your metrics are measured on a calendar cadence, for example, if you report on your metrics quarterly, monthly, you would want to choose calendar aligned. Rolling time windows are better suited for operational purposes, so we'll go with this one. And I want to choose a short time span, so 1 day, so I will be monitoring my metrics daily. And then I can move on to my error budget calculation method. So for this specific objective, I want to choose a target. And let's say 95% will be okay. So I'll call my experience okay. In the next step, I'm asked to provide some additional information. So display name of my metric. Let's call it Sumo Logic logs SLO. I can attach alert policies to my SLO. I won't do it right now. I'll show you later on how to do that. And I can add some additional information like description, external URLs, and labels. I'll skip this part for the purpose of this presentation, and I'm just going to click Create SLO. And my first SLO is created. And while we are waiting from data from my data source, let's create another one. I'm choosing the same service and the same data source that we used before. But this time I'm going to use my metric data. So for metrics, I want to monitor the CPU load average. So I'm using Again, the exact same metric used in Sumo Logic. And here we can see two additional parameters. So quantization. Quantization in Sumo Logic is the process of aggregating metric data points for time series over some interval of time. And rollup, which is just an aggregation function for Sumo used with quantization. For this SLO, I'm going to stick with default, so 15 seconds, and rollup, I'm going to leave as none. Again, I'm defining a time window. I'm going to use exactly the same one I used before because I want to use my SLO for quick decisions. I don't want to report longer periods of time. And for my error budget calculation method, again, I'm using occurrences instead of time slices. So those two options, I should have explained that before. Occurrences count specific attempts, whereas time slices measure how many good minutes were achieved in a given period of time or time window. Because I'm interested in specific events, I'm going to choose occurrences. And here I can set my targets. So for this one, my target will be 95% and value less than, say, 0.7. This is going to be my perfect objective or perfect experience. But what is really interesting and useful is that you can set different thresholds for your SLOs. And for this one, I can specify different targets. So let's say 17% values less than or equal to 1. We can call it needs attention. This way of setting your SLOs with multiple objectives will give you much more flexibility in testing your product hypothesis, checking the different levels of performance of your applications, and basically having better business discussions around your product performance or resource allocation. And then let's again give this SLO a name, Sumo Logic Metrics SLO. Whoops, sorry, this is not the right place, but as you can see, the validation works perfectly. And I'm creating my SLO. Okay, as you can see, I already started receiving some data, but to get more informed decision, more informed SLOs, Nobl9 will have to spend some time gathering data. So I'll stop here and we'll come back in a couple of hours to see how our SLOs perform. See you in a couple of hours. Hello and welcome back after a short break. It's been a couple of hours and Nobl9 already accumulated some data. So let's come back to our SLOs and take a quick look at what's going on. Let's start with the first one, the one that we use to track the overall health of our Kubernetes cluster. And as you can see, this one needs our attention. Let's go into details, see what's happening. Let me zoom in a little bit. We have our SLI data. We see ratio between total requests and all requests. We also can see our reliability burn down, which indicates that we didn't manage to hit the assumed target, which is way below our assumptions. And we can also track our error budget burn rate. This SLO is not doing so great, so we have a couple of choices here. We can have a discussion with the wider team, and for example, think if the threshold that we assumed is too high, or maybe slightly lower performance will be acceptable. If not, I would suggest addressing the situation as soon as possible and allocate some resources that will could start fixing the problem before it, for example, escalates into an incident. The second one that measured the CPU load average for the past 15 minutes is doing much better. We haven't burned our error budget. We are meeting our targets. We have a lot of room for errors. So you could think about maybe moving resources from this area to the one that we discussed before, so that, you know, the resources are utilized in a much more effective way. But okay, so tracking health of your application manually can be a tedious task. So you would probably want to be alerted if anything happens with one of these two SLOs. In Nobl9, you can do that using integrations with alert methods. Our organization doesn't have any alert methods yet, so let's add one. In Nobl9, you can use from the selection of different alert methods, and Webhook gives you full flexibility into connecting to whatever you need. For the purpose of this presentation, let's set up Slack as our alert method, so that we will be notified on our Slack channel that something is happening with our SLOs. Configuration of your alert method is super simple. You just need to provide this Slack URL. As I mentioned, all the resources have to live in a project. So let's add it to the one that we used for our SLOs. And let's name it. So let it be, for example, Slack Sumo Webinar, so that I can find it easily. Again, description is completely optional, so I'll skip it for the purpose of this presentation. And my connection has been established correctly. Then I can go to alerts and create an alert policy that will be attached to my SLO. I can choose from the following conditions. I can select more than one or just one. And I can decide whether I want to be alerted if my error budget will be exhausted in a number of days, if my remaining budget is, for example, 10%, or I can decide to be alerted if my error budget burns too fast, and soon it might be completely burned. I can also select a cooldown period, which is a useful feature to resolve my alerts, so that we are not alerted when the alert condition is no longer valid. So let's go with the first condition, and I'm deciding that I want to be alerted if the error budget of my SLO will be exhausted in 3 days. Then again, I need to attach my alert policy to a project. I need to give it a name and decide on the severity. I can choose from high, medium, and low. I'll go with low. I can add a description and labels. These are optional. I will skip that. And I will select an alert method. And as you can see, this is the Slack integration that I created just seconds ago. All right. And simple as that, my alert policy is created. I can create more, of course, but let's move on to my service level objectives and find the ones that I'm interested in. This one is doing pretty good, but just in case something is wrong, I want to be alerted. So I'm going into this edit mode, going to the 5th step, where I can attach an alert policy to my SLO. As you can see, this alert policy is already available in my project. So I'm just clicking add and save my SLO. And if anything goes wrong, if there is a chance that the error budget will be exhausted in 3 days, I will get Slack notification and I will be able to act ahead of time before any incident happens. Okay, so that's the main user journey, but I also wanted to mention a couple of things. For example, you may want to track the history of your SLOs. So I'm filtering reports by my project. I click apply, and here you can see I can preview the history of my SLOs. This history is not really rich because this SLO has a couple of hours, but in case you want to look back, you want to have a retrospective with your team after some time, you can use reports to have some data that can be discussed. In addition, you can also go to Service Health Dashboard, which gives you an overview of all of your services, and you can have like a bird's eye view on your entire application. My Sumo Logic Deminar and my Sumo Logic projects are pretty small, but if you have larger organization, this could be a really convenient view, for example, for executive level managers to see the health of the overall organization at a glance. Okay, so that's all for today. And I hope that this presentation gave you a better understanding of how Sumo Logic and Nobl9 can help your business. And I hope I'll see you next time. Bye.